Rain hadn't started yet when my stepfather stood up at my mother's 60th birthday gala and ruined what was left of my childhood in front of 230 people. I remember the exact moment because I was holding a champagne flute and I noticed the bubbles had stopped rising. That's the kind of thing your brain locks onto when it's about to be split open. The bubbles. The way the chandelier above the dance floor at the Beaumont Hotel made little prisms on the white tablecloth. The smell of the gardenias my mother insisted on, even though they were out of season and cost a fortune to fly in from somewhere in California. I was 29. I had just been promoted to senior counsel at a private equity firm in Manhattan. I was wearing a navy silk dress I'd bought specifically because my mother once said navy made me look less aggressive. I had flown in from New York on my own dime, taken 3 days off work, and brought a gift card to her favorite spa because I knew better than to try to pick out anything sentimental. Sentimental gifts from me made her uncomfortable. They always had. My stepfather, whose name was Roland and who had married my mother when I was 11, tapped his knife against his glass and stood. He was a tall man, the kind of tall that took up rooms before he'd even said anything. He owned a chain of car dealerships across the Carolinas, and he had the voice of a man who had spent 40 years convincing people to sign paperwork they hadn't fully read. "I want to say something about the woman I'm lucky to call my wife," he began. And people clapped, and my mother put her hand over her heart in that practiced way she had. I should have known. The thing about people like Roland is that they don't ambush you. They telegraph everything. They want the build-up. They want you to sit there sweating through your silk dress while they construct the gallows in front of you, board by board. He talked about meeting my mother at a charity auction in 1996. He talked about how she'd been burdened when they met. That was the word he used, burdened. He didn't look at me when he said it, but everyone at my table did, and I felt my cousin's wife reach under the tablecloth and squeeze my knee. Then he said, "Margaret came into our marriage with a complication. Most men would have run. I didn't. I raised that complication as my own, even when it was clear there wasn't much to work with." A few people laughed. Nervous, uncertain laughter. The kind that hasn't decided yet whether what's happening is a joke or a crime. And tonight, surrounded by our real family, by my son who has built something with his life, by the grandchildren who carry our name, I want to give Margaret what she deserved 30 years ago. Peace. A clean slate. The acknowledgement that we have only one real child between us, and his name is Bradford, and he is sitting right here. He gestured at his son. His son raised a glass and grinned. "As for the other one," Roland said, and now he did look at me. "Well, we tried. Margaret tried. I tried. But you can't make something out of nothing. The hospital should have done a better job that day. There, I said it. 40 years of holding my tongue. Now everyone here knows what your mother and I have known privately for a long time. Happy birthday, sweetheart." He kissed my mother on the cheek and sat down. My mother did not stand up. She did not push back her chair. She did not say a single word. She picked up her napkin, dabbed at the corners of her mouth, and smiled at the woman across from her like nothing had happened. The room held its breath. Then Bradford, my stepbrother, who was 44 years old and still lives off a trust, lifted his glass and called out, "To Mom and Dad." And like a wave, people lifted their glasses, and they drank, and someone laughed too loudly, somewhere near the bar, and the band, which had been quietly tuning, started playing a Frank Sinatra song my mother loved. I sat there for maybe 20 seconds. I am told later it looked like much longer. Then I set down the flute. I picked up my clutch. I stood up. I walked the length of that ballroom in my navy dress, past the gardenias and the prisms and the people who were now studying their plates, and I pushed open the heavy door to the lobby, and I kept walking until I was outside on the marble steps under the porte-cochere. That's when it started raining. Not a drizzle, a real Carolina downpour, the kind that comes down sideways. The valet looked at me and I shook my head and started walking down the long driveway toward the road. I didn't have an umbrella. I didn't care. I made it about 100 yards before my Aunt Frances caught up to me. She was my mother's older sister, the one who had never married, who had taught middle school for 31 years and now lived alone with 2 beagles. She was barefoot. She had taken off her heels and was carrying them in one hand and an umbrella in the other. "Get under here," she said. "You're going to catch pneumonia." "I'm fine." "You are not fine, baby. Nobody is fine after that." She walked me to my rental car. She didn't say anything else for a long time. When I got the door open, she grabbed my wrist. "Listen to me. Whatever you do next, do it slow. Don't do it angry. Anger makes people sloppy. Promise me." I looked at her. Her mascara was running. I realized she had been crying. "I promise," I said. "And another thing." She leaned closer. "Your mother knew. She knew he was going to say something tonight. She told me last week she was nervous about the speech. I asked her why and she said Roland wanted to clear the air. I should have warned you. I didn't think he'd—" She stopped. "I should have warned you. That was the part that broke me, not the speech. The speech I could have survived as a single terrible event. But knowing my mother had known, had been told in advance that her husband intended to publicly disown her only biological child at her own birthday party, and had said nothing. That was a different kind of wound. I drove back to my hotel. I peeled off the soaking dress. I sat on the edge of the bathtub in my underwear for a long time. Then I made 3 phone calls and sent 1 email. The first call was to my old college roommate, who had become a forensic accountant in Atlanta. Her name was Priya, and she had once told me, years ago at a wedding, "If you ever need to know where someone's money actually is, call me. I owe you for senior year." I said, "I'm calling in the favor. I need everything you can find on Roland Whitfield Caldwell. Public records, business filings, the dealerships, the LLC structure. I want to know what he owns and what he owes." She said, "Tonight?" I said, "I'll wire you a retainer in the morning. Whatever your rate is, doubled." She said, "Honey, what happened?" I told her in 3 sentences. There was a long silence. "I'll start tonight," she said. "Don't sleep with your phone off." The second call was to a woman named Eliza Bowman, who had been the trust officer for my maternal grandmother's estate. My grandmother, who had died when I was 22, had set up an irrevocable trust for me before she passed. My mother and Roland had both tried to talk me out of accessing it for years. They had wanted me to leave it growing until I was older, until I was married, until I was older, until I was married, until I was settled. I had always assumed they were being protective. Eliza picked up on the 4th ring, even though it was after 11 on a Saturday night. "Eliza," I said, "I need a full statement on the trust. Tonight. I also need to know if anyone besides me has accessed it, contacted you about it, or tried to make any changes since my grandmother died." Eliza didn't speak for a moment. "Sweetheart," she said, "are you finally asking me what I've been waiting 8 years for you to ask me?" My hand went cold. "What does that mean?" "I cannot tell you over the phone." "I will be in my office at 7 in the morning. Drive down to Charleston. I have a file with your name on it that I have been keeping in a fireproof cabinet since 2018. Bring identification." I said, "Eliza, please, just tell me, is there money missing?" "There is something missing," she said, "but it isn't only money. Drive safe." The third call was to my brother. Not Bradford, my real brother. The one almost nobody at that party knew existed because my mother had spent 35 years pretending he didn't. His name was Caleb. He was 3 years older than me. He had been my mother's first child, born when she was 18, and she had given him up for adoption before she met my biological father. I had only learned about him when I was 26, when one of those DNA test kits matched us. We had been quietly building a relationship for 3 years. He lived in Portland. He was a high school music teacher. He had 2 kids. I had met exactly twice. My mother had begged me not to tell anyone about him. Roland did not know he existed. He picked up on the second ring. "Caleb," I said, "I need to ask you something. and I need you to think before you answer. Okay. Do you have copies of the letters our mother sent you in the 90s, when you were still with your adoptive family? You told me once she wrote to your parents and asked for updates. Yeah, my mom kept all of them. I have them in a box in the garage. Are any of them notarized? Are any of them on letterhead? Is there anything in them that proves she knew exactly where you were and chose not to bring you into the family? A pause. Most of them, yes. Why? I need scans. As soon as you can. Tonight is possible. Can you do that for me? Marlowe? That was my name. He was the only person on earth who said it the way I liked. What is going on? Tonight, Roland stood up at Mom's birthday and told 230 people that I was a mistake, that they should have left me at the hospital. Mom didn't say anything. Aunt Frances told me. Mom knew he was going to do it. The silence on the other end was so long I thought the call had dropped. Then Caleb said very quietly, "Okay, I'll scan everything tonight. I'll email it before sunrise. Thank you." Marlowe, one more thing. If you're doing what I think you're doing, be sure. Once you light this, you can't unlight it. I know. Okay, I love you. Be careful. That was the email. It went to a partner at my firm, a woman named Constance Vega, who specialized in trust litigation and elder financial abuse. I had clerked for her 2 summers in law school. I trusted her with my life. The email was brief. It said I might have a personal matter requiring discreet representation and I would call her Monday morning. I attached nothing yet. I just wanted her on standby. I didn't sleep that night. At 5 in the morning, I got dressed in jeans and a sweatshirt I'd brought for the airport, drank a cup of bad hotel coffee, and drove the 2 hours to Charleston with the rain hammering my windshield the whole way. Eliza Bowman was waiting for me at the front of her office building in a navy blazer with her hair still wet from the shower. She unlocked the door without a word and led me up to a small conference room on the 3rd floor where a manila folder, 3 inches thick, sat waiting on the table. She made us both tea. Then she sat down across from me. In 2018, she said, your stepfather came to my office. He brought your mother with him. They asked me to facilitate a withdrawal from your trust on your behalf. They said you had run into financial trouble in New York and were too embarrassed to ask for help. They had a document with what they claimed was your signature on it. She slid a photocopy across the table. My signature. Or something that looked like it, authorizing a transfer of $300,000 to an LLC I had never heard of. Dated April of 2018. I refused, she said. I told them I would only release funds to you in person, with photo identification and with a notarized statement of consent. They tried 3 more times that year, different documents, different stories, each time more pressure. I documented every visit. I have it all in this folder. I felt something cold move through my chest. In April of 2018, I had been recovering from a car accident. I had been in a hospital bed for 6 weeks. I had been on heavy painkillers. My mother had flown up to take care of me. She had taken my mail key. She had handled my bills. I had been so grateful. There's more, Eliza said. Your grandmother left something else with the trust that doesn't get released until you ask for it. She left a letter. She wrote it 8 months before she died, after she and your stepfather had a falling out at Christmas of 2013. She made me promise to keep it sealed until you came asking on your own initiative. Not because someone told you to. On your own. What's in it? Eliza pushed a smaller envelope across the table, my grandmother's handwriting on the front, my full name. I haven't read it, she said. I never read clients' sealed letters, but she told me when she gave it to me, she said, Eliza, when my granddaughter finally figures out what these people are doing to her, this letter will hold the proof of what I tried to do to stop them. She used that exact phrase. I wrote it down. Tried to stop them. I opened the envelope with hands that were shaking so hard I almost tore the letter. It was 4 pages long on her stationery, in her looped careful handwriting. I am not going to write out the whole thing here, but I will tell you what it said. My grandmother had discovered in the fall of 2013 that Roland had been using money from my mother's inheritance, money my grandfather had specifically left to be held for me, to fund his dealership expansion. He had pressured my mother into signing it over. My grandmother had confronted them. She had threatened to change her will. 3 weeks later, she had been diagnosed with a cancer that killed her 10 months later. She believed, but could not prove, that the stress of that confrontation had accelerated it. She wrote that she had spent her last year quietly restructuring everything she could so that what passed to me would pass cleanly, without Roland or my mother able to touch it. She had also kept copies of bank statements and correspondence proving the misuse of the original inheritance. Those were taped to the back of the 4th page. I sat in that little conference room and I read that letter 3 times. Then I called Constance Vega in New York, and I told her I was coming back on the first flight Monday morning, and I had a case for her. I want to tell you about the next 2 months, because the comments under stories like this always want to know what happened day by day, and I'm not going to pretend that revenge is something that just appears, fully formed, like a dragon coming out of a cave. It isn't. It is small and slow and made of paperwork. I went back to New York that Sunday. I did not call my mother. I did not respond to any of the texts I had been getting since the gala, and there were a lot of them, mostly from cousins and family friends, ranging from, "We're so sorry," to, "Your stepfather had too much to drink, please forgive him." My mother sent me one text. It said, "Honey, Roland feels terrible, call him." I didn't. Monday morning, Constance and I met in a conference room with 2 of her associates, a paralegal and a forensic accountant. I gave them the folder from Eliza. I gave them the scans Caleb had sent. I gave them Priya's preliminary report, which I had received in the small hours of Sunday morning and which contained 2 pieces of information that made Constance lean back in her chair and whistle. The first was that Roland's dealership empire was not nearly as solid as he liked to present. 3 of his 5 locations were heavily leveraged. He had taken out a personal loan in 2019 against assets that, according to my grandmother's records, partially belonged to me. The second was that Bradford, the golden son, the one Roland had toasted at the gala, was the listed officer on the LLC that the forged transfer in 2018 had been routed to. Bradford had received my $300,000. He had used it to buy a beach house in Kiowa. Constance asked me what I wanted. I thought about it for a long time. I thought about Aunt Frances saying, "Don't be angry. Anger makes people sloppy." I thought about my grandmother spending her last good year of life trying to build me a fence I could shelter behind one day. I thought about Caleb, who had spent 4 decades being denied by the same woman who had raised me and who had still answered the phone on the second ring. I told Constance, I want my money back. I want it back with interest. I want the misuse of my grandfather's inheritance to my mother investigated and unwound to the extent possible. I want Bradford named as a defendant. I do not want any criminal charges if we can avoid them, because I do not want my mother in handcuffs, even now. But I want the restitution to be complete. I want it on paper. I want Roland to know exactly who did this to him. Constance said, "We can do that. It will take time. Are you prepared for them to find out what's coming before it lands?" I said, "I am prepared for anything except going back to that house. I am never going back to that house." She nodded. "Then let's begin." The first letter went out 2 weeks later. It was 12 pages long. It was addressed to Roland personally and copied to his corporate counsel, his accountant, his 3 business partners, and Bradford. It outlined in extraordinary detail every transaction we had identified, every forged document, every misappropriation of trust funds, every breach of fiduciary duty by my mother as trustee of her own mother's residual estate. It proposed a settlement, full restitution of $2.4 million, including interest and damages, a sworn affidavit acknowledging the conduct, and the immediate sale of the Kiowa beach house with proceeds returned to my trust. If accepted within 30 days, we would not file suit, and we would not refer the matter to the State Attorney General's office for criminal review. If not accepted, we would do both. The accompanying brief was already drafted. I did not hear anything for 11 days, then I started hearing everything. It started with a text from a cousin I had not spoken to in 2 years. "Marlowe, are you okay? Mom said something is going on with Uncle Roland. Please call me." Then a voicemail from Bradford's wife, who I had always liked. She was crying. She said, "I don't know what's happening, but I want you to know I had no idea about any of this. Whatever Brad did, I had no idea." Then my mother called. 7 times in one afternoon. I did not pick up. Then Roland called. He left a voicemail that started professional and ended screaming. Then Aunt Frances called. I picked up for Aunt Frances. "He's losing his mind," she said. "He came to my house last night. He told me you were trying to destroy him. He told me you had always been jealous of Bradford. He told me your grandmother had hated him because she was a snob and now you were finishing what she started." Aunt Frances, did you read the documents Constance sent you? I had sent her copies. I wanted at least one person in my family to know the truth from a primary source. I read every word, baby. Every word. I knew he was a son of a bitch. I didn't know he was a thief. "And Mom?" A long pause. "Your mother is going to have to make her own choices now. I love her. She's my sister. But I cannot be the bridge between you two anymore. Not after what I read." By week 7, the calls had become constant. Not just from family. From people I hadn't talked to in 15 years. From Roland's business partners who had received copies of our settlement letter and were now apparently insisting he settle or be bought out. From a woman I had gone to high school with who said her parents played golf with Roland and they had told her something terrible was happening to him and was I involved. From Bradford himself, twice, both times begging me to come to the table like family. By the end of the second month, I had 68 unread voicemails and 143 unread text messages. They all said, in one form or another, "What did you do to us? What did I do to you?" The day Constance called to tell me the settlement was accepted, that Roland had folded completely after his largest business partner threatened to pull out, that Bradford had agreed to the sale of the Kiowa house, that $2.4 million would be returned to my trust within 90 days, that my mother had quietly signed a separate document admitting her role as trustee in the misuse of funds. That day, I was at my desk in New York eating a tuna sandwich. I did not cry. I did not cheer. I called Caleb. He said, "How does it feel?" I said, "It feels like Saturday morning." Quiet. He said, "Mom called me yesterday. I almost dropped the phone." What? She found my number somehow. I think Frances gave it to her. She was crying. She wanted to talk about you. She wanted me to be a peacemaker. She asked me if I would help her get you back. What did you say? I told her I had a sister I had spent 35 years not knowing because of choices she made, and I was not going to spend the next 35 years convincing that sister to forgive a woman who had not earned it, and then I hung up. I sat at my desk and looked out at the gray Manhattan sky. "Caleb?" "Yeah?" "Will you come for Thanksgiving?" "You and Hannah and the kids? My apartment is big enough. I want to cook." He laughed. He has a laugh like our mother's, which I noticed the first time we met and have made my peace with. "Yeah," he said. "We'll come." I did not respond to my mother for 9 months. I did not respond to Roland ever. The Kiowa Beach house sold. The money came back. I used part of it to pay off Caleb's mortgage, which I did not tell him about until the deed showed up clean. He cried, which is something I had never seen him do, and I am glad I did it. I used another portion to set up a small scholarship in my grandmother's name at the community college she had taught night classes at for 20 years. I used the rest to buy my first apartment in a building in Brooklyn with a view of the bridge. Aunt Frances visits me twice a year. She brings me jam she makes from the figs in her backyard. We do not talk about my mother unless I bring her up first, which I have done exactly twice. My mother eventually wrote me a letter. 2 pages in her handwriting that looks so much like my grandmother's. She said she was sorry. She said she had been afraid of Roland for longer than she could remember. She said she understood if I never wrote back. I kept the letter in a drawer for a year. Then I wrote back. One paragraph. I told her I did not hate her. I told her I was not coming home. I told her if she ever left him, ever truly left him, I would meet her for coffee somewhere neutral, just once, and we could talk about what came next. I have not heard from her since. Roland's dealerships, I am told, are smaller now. 3 locations instead of 5. He turned 70 last spring. Bradford moved to Florida. I am 32 now. I have not been back to South Carolina in 3 years. I have a brother who calls me every Sunday. I have a niece who calls me Aunt Marlowe and a nephew who calls me Mar. I have a dog. I have an apartment I own. I have a job I am good at. I have an aunt who sends me fig jam. I have a grandmother in a frame on my dresser who I talk to sometimes, late at night when the city is finally quiet. I do not call what I did revenge. Revenge is too small a word, and it implies that I did it to make them suffer. I did not. I did it to take back what they had taken, and to make sure they could not take anything from me again. The suffering on their end was a byproduct, a reasonable one. But a byproduct. A long time ago, on a rainy night in a hotel bathroom in Charleston, my aunt told me anger makes people sloppy. She was right. It was not anger that built the case against Roland Whitfield Caldwell. It was patience. It was paperwork. It was a forensic accountant who owed me a favor and a trust officer who had been waiting 8 years for me to ask the right question, and a grandmother who had built me a fence from beyond the grave. If you are sitting somewhere right now and someone in your family has just done something unforgivable in front of a room full of people, and you are wondering whether you should cry or scream or set something on fire, I want to tell you the only thing that ever helped me. Walk out of the room. Walk out into the rain if you have to. Find one person who will hold an umbrella over you. Then go home and pick up the phone and call the people who can help you build the thing that will outlast the people who broke you. Build it slow. Build it on paper. Don't let them see your face again until everything is signed. That is what I did. And on the day all 68 of those voicemails came in, I did not listen to a single one. I deleted them in a batch, the way you delete spam. Because that's what they had become to me. Noise from a life I no longer lived. The bubbles in that champagne flute had stopped rising for a reason. They had been trying to tell me something all along. Looking back now, 3 years out from that rainy night in Charleston, I understand something I could not have seen while it was happening. Every cruel thing Roland did to me over the 18 years he was married to my mother had been a deposit into an account he assumed I would never collect on. He thought I was the kind of woman who absorbed humiliation and apologized for it. He thought my silence at the dinner table meant I had nothing inside me. He had spent so long mistaking my patience for weakness that when patience finally became something else, he could not even recognize what was killing him. That is the thing about cause and effect in a real human life. It does not announce itself. It does not arrive on schedule. It accumulates in quiet places. In a forensic accountant's office, in a fireproof cabinet in Charleston, in a box of letters in a garage in Portland, in a grandmother's handwriting that waited 8 years to be read. Roland built his life on the assumption that nobody was keeping score. He was wrong. Everyone was keeping score. He just did not understand that I had been raised by the woman who taught me how to count. If there is anything I want a younger version of myself to know, it is this. Goodness is not the same as compliance. For most of my 20s, I thought being a good daughter meant swallowing the small cruelties so the family could stay intact. I called that virtue. It was not virtue. It was fear wearing virtue's coat. Real character is not measured by how much you tolerate from people who are hurting you. It is measured by what you build when they finally show you who they are. The mind matters more than the wound. Anger would have made me confront Roland in that ballroom. Anger would have given him exactly the scene he wanted. The screaming daughter he could shake his head about for the rest of his life. Aunt Frances was right about that one thing. Sloppy work cannot punish anyone. Careful work can dismantle them entirely. And endurance. Endurance is the part nobody talks about because it does not look heroic. Driving 2 hours through a downpour at 5 in the morning to read a letter from a dead woman. 11 days of silence after that 12-page letter went out, 9 months before I could write back to my own mother. None of that was dramatic. All of it mattered. The people who hurt you are counting on you to give up before the paperwork lands. Do not give up before the paperwork lands. I do not know who is reading this. Maybe someone whose family laughed at them last Christmas. Maybe someone whose stepfather called them a complication. Whatever it was, whoever it came from, you do not owe them your collapse. You owe yourself the long, slow, patient work of becoming someone they can no longer touch. Walk out of the room. Find your umbrella, then go home and start counting.